It's Thursday. It's your favorite day of the week because we drop episodes weekly for this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in to Silicon Sports Spectator. Today got lots of topics, including the NFL draft kicking off today. Also some Warriors playoff action. We also got hockey, we got soccer, we got baseball. You got all the Silicon Sports right here. Cue the music. All right, April 24th, today is a big day. It's the NFL draft. We'll get to that in a moment. That's kicking off later this evening. Rather than leading with that story, I'll lead up with a couple of other things just around. We'll rattle off. Hopefully that means you'll stick around to the very end. The Sharks, of course, in their off-season right now, but it doesn't mean they just rest on their laurels if they have any. What are our players up to? Well, we got lots of reactions. Players clearing out their lockers, giving their final press conferences after the season. A couple news items worth sharing. Georgiev, I guess we'll call him our lead goaltender here, made a mid-season trade for him. Georgiev is already confirmed that he is out as an unrestricted free agent. The Sharks are not planning to bring him back. It's too bad. Georgiev was a starter on one of the top NHL teams, won a chip with the Colorado Avalanche, and just has not stayed consistent. When the Sharks brought him over, we was thinking that maybe a change of scenery would improve his lot, but that was not the case. He's out. He didn't really impress during his Sharks stint. During the half season he was here with us. Meanwhile, Mackenzie Blackwood's looking pretty good it's a tough series there against Dallas, but on the Avalanche, Mackenzie Blackwood, our former goaltender, is definitely proven that he's the go-to guy there in Colorado. Definitely a contender, though they have that really tough matchup against Dallas. Lost an overtime game last night. So we'll see how that series plays out. Lots of former Sharks to watch throughout the NHL playoffs. So I hope you're tuning in to some of them. I keep it out. I even just saw Evander Kane makes a season debut. Former Shark, still with the Edmonton Oilers. Hadn't played a single game all of the regular season, but is back with them. They are down 0-2 in their series against the LA Kings. Gosh, I hate the Kings. Can we all agree on that? As a special mention, though, to Macklin Celebrini, where he gets called up to Team Canada for the World Championships. I always joke it's the playoffs for the non-playoff teams that a lot of NHL players and stars, if their teams are not in the NHL playoffs, they'll usually go and participate in this tournament if they get called up. Celebrini gets called to Team Canada. And just yesterday, Will Smith announced to Team USA he'll be playing under his Sharks coach, Ryan Warsofsky, and representing Team USA. Congrats, Will Smith. I look forward to seeing a USA-Canada matchup there. Of course, Macklin and Will have this great rivalry going back to their days in Boston, between Boston College, Boston University, and here we get to see them face each other again in the World Championships. It's a fun tournament. It's hard to compete with the NHL playoff action that's going on, but I'll definitely tune in for the big games in the World Championships. Always a good one to see. And great to see some of our young stars getting called up to their respective countries for that. Big news just announced today. Sam Dickinson, one of the Sharks' #1 draft picks. In fact, he was voted the prospect of the year in the Sharks organization. He's our 19-year-old rookie playing in the OHL. Who does he play for? The London Knights. And he just today was named OHL's top defenseman. That's right, our teenage star. Check out these stats. And these are just mind-blowing stats. And I know it's OHL, so it's, I guess, considered amateur hockey. It's not professional. But his stat line is just mind-blowing. Sam Dickinson, 29 goals, 91 points total in just 55 regular season games. Plus 64 rating. Can I interest you in that? Absolutely. His stats will certainly speak for themselves. I think he'll make a great push to certainly into the Barracuda next year. If not, I bet he cracks the roster for the Sharks at some point. Very excited to watch his development. But congratulations to Sam Dickinson. Been following him all year, and just the stat lines that he puts up game after game are something to be remarked at. Elsewhere is the Barracuda. Some more trophies to brag about here. Andrew Poturalski. Pots. He won officially the AHL's scoring title as the top scoring person in that league. Congratulations, Andrew. I guess he's won it a couple times before as well. Let me get his stat line here for you. Yeah, Andrew had 73 total points, career high 30 goals for him, and that's just across 59 games for the Barracuda. Of course, he made up to the Sharks roster a couple of times. I did it right there. And a special shout out, Andrew, little trivia fact. He's from Williamsville, New York. And if you know me, that's ties to my Buffalo roots. So in fact, some close friends still live in Williamsville. Congrats, Andrew. Great performances. And that's another prospect that we can keep an eye on to see. Is he going to make it into the Sharks roster on a consistent basis? I don't know. Barracuda playoffs begin for them in the AHL playoffs against the Ontario Reign, and that is Ontario of Southern California, the LA Kings affiliate. So we definitely want to beat them. They're the higher seed. I'm liking how the Barracuda are looking. All right, playoffs begin for that. Watch for updates here. Switching over to some quick soccer notes just to mention. Congrats to Bay FC on their win this past week. Kiki Pickett got goal of the week. It's an impressive one. Look it up. The one that we had this past weekend was a 1-0 shutout. Kiki had the one goal, and it was an impressive one. An absolute highlight reel. It was a beauty, so check that out. The other thing about Bay FC is they announced an upcoming game at Oracle. They're trying to get 40,000 people to watch a game. This will be on August 23rd at Oracle Park. Very cool to see them moving into a bigger venue for a special event there. I'll definitely try to get tickets for that one. Earthquakes had kind of an ugly loss, but a couple of notes from that match. Chicho Arango had 2 goals in a 5-3 loss. But in fact, Chicho actually was even named to the MLS, what do they call it, man of the match or match team, or basically is one of the top stars for the league across all matches this past week. Too bad it was in a losing effort. But the Quakes also making some news, making a couple minor trades here this week. DeJuan Jones is signed with up there. You might know his name from the U.S. men's national team. He's a defender for them, and so we made a trade for him. And Noel Buck, an under-22 midfielder, made a trade with the New England Revolution for him. Keep an eye on him. It probably won't crack the roster right away, or maybe just in some extra minutes, whatever, but certainly is part of our development program. So that's a name to watch, Noel Buck. Maybe the one other thing that I thought was newsworthy coming out of the earthquake camps is Coach Bruce Arena made some kind of snarky remarks about the U.S. men's national team and was very critical of Coach Pochettino. I know him well from his years when he managed Tottenham Hotspur, and probably Tottenham's best years were under Poch. But Bruce Arena called them out for these awful losses against Panama and Canada, saying that those were inexcusable, and really even kind of pointed to, I don't know if we'd call this racist or not, but basically saying that foreigners shouldn't be coaching the domestic squads. You know what I mean? So not calling him out by race, but just to say that Poch is a Argentinian guy, and there would be something missing is that he couldn't properly motivate the U.S. players to their peak performance, because those were winnable games against Panama and Canada. Very critical there. Bruce Arena has been the U.S. men's national coach twice, so maybe he's having a hard time letting go. But anyways, definitely just an interesting soundbite coming out of Bruce Arena. Perhaps it's criticism well worth noting, especially coming into a World Cup year next year. A World Cup, no less, that we will be hosting. All right, some quick baseball news. Giants still right in the thick of things in that NL West battle, technically in third at 16-9 as of today. Yeah, but I've been certainly catching some of the highlights and news items around the games. The one player that's really stood out for me, and maybe just because he had 2 very solid appearances, and that's Logan Webb. Looking great. I think is probably his best pitching performance. 12 strikeouts. But it was in a loss. His ERA as of yesterday, where he beat the Brewers, got his ERA down. It's 1.98 ERA, so he's looking sharp right now. There's also a funny clip of him this past week. I think it was after that loss. It was against the Angels. Yeah, I can't remember which game it was, but it was after the post-game interview while he's chatting up with folks in the locker room. Someone in the background lets out this huge fart. Logan just absolutely loses it. During the interview, he tries to maintain his composure, but he had this great line. It's just like, farts are always funny. And, I think that may be the theme for one of our podcasts today. So, because indeed it is true. All right. So anyways, congrats, Logan Webb. Looking sharp so far for the Giants, who continue to make some noise in the NL West and remain very competitive in that tough division. Let's get into basketball now. We're in the playoffs. Warriors splitting games in Houston, taking away their home court advantage. First game, the Warriors looked absolutely great, played the game that they wanted to. I was honestly thinking that we might be able to sweep this team. And my reason for that is I look at Houston, who are very impressive on the defensive side of the ball. They don't have enough offense to compete with the Warriors. Game 2 was interesting because, here they come back. They have a pretty convincing win. At the same time, here's what they needed to do to win that game. They had to foul Steph pretty much any time he touched the ball. They had to knock Jimmy Butler out of the game and perhaps out of the series, which is devastating news. Our second best player. What else? They had to have a near perfect shooting night from 3-pointers and performances all around. It feels like a lot of things had to go right for them. It's been a chippy series for both teams. And even in what I thought was their best all-around performance at peak Houston Rockets, hats off to them for that win. But at the same time, everything went right for them. And they still only managed, I think it was 109 points. To me, that still seems very vulnerable. And in fact, the Warriors, they kept, getting it close. I think, close to 10 points, closing the gap there. And I felt like, gosh, like a Jimmy Butler here, could really, finish off that gap. And, it might just be that we don't have enough offense, especially if Jimmy's out long-term with this hip contusion. MRIs are happening today, so we'll know soon. He's currently listed as questionable for Game 3 back at Chase Center. I think if he's out, for a long period of time, it is going to be a tough haul for the Warriors to finish off this series. If they do get Jimmy back, and maybe not even for Game 3, I think their chances are good for still winning this series. It will be a huge factor however he plays. Other news for the Warriors, Draymond Green officially getting the Defensive Player of the Year nomination for the league for the year. I think he's clear-cut favorite to win this award. Dyson Daniels of the Atlanta Hawks and Evan Mobley of the Cleveland Cavaliers are the other contenders for this. I don't know a ton about Dyson Daniels, but I can certainly speak for Evan Mobley, who is probably the one that is going to give Draymond the toughest competition here, for this. And you can make an easy case for him, but there's just no one like Draymond Green and who and how he defends every position. So that versatility is probably the most important thing. Just watching Draymond in these playoffs, who's continued to look good, from a defensive standpoint. The way that he's been holding Houston in check in a lot of ways, it continues to be it. I loved Houston, having their FU Draymond chant, and that was kind of a big talking item after yesterday's game. Good luck, Draymond. You got my vote. Lastly, not a lot of news coming out of Valkyrie's camp other than, after their draft and thing, which we covered last week. One funny item worth mentioning is that I noticed on LinkedIn that they have an opening for a mascot. All you spectators out there, if you're in need of some interesting work, I'm curious to know what that mascot is going to be. Actually, the pay was pretty decent. Considering a career change, check that out. Go Valkyries. I'll be at the preseason game against the LA Spark in a couple of weeks. All right, last item for the day, and that is the NFL draft begins this evening. Niners have 11 picks to choose. They pick number 11 in the first round. I won't go into a ton of depth here or who I think they're going to draft or anything like that. I'd be doing you a disservice if I went into that kind of analysis. And especially with the 49ers, where in an offseason where they lost so many veteran players, they got to rebuild their roster in a lot of ways. It's hard to say who that they'll take. Especially in the first round with the 11th pick overall. Probably won't trade out of that. I don't foresee that happening because they definitely do have needs to fill. But I imagine for the point at where they are, look for them to take either an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. One of those core pieces to really build around. I think of Trent Williams, for as good as he is. Age 37 though, and if you're going to prioritize Brock Purdy, and I imagine, that the 49ers are making that a priority here as they're continuing to negotiate contracts with him. Brock is successful when you can protect him. If you don't protect him, he's awful. So I would say an offensive lineman to help protect him, knowing that Trent Williams is beginning to age out, still looks good, but again, winding down his career, you got to start thinking for the future there. And if you sign Brock to a long-term deal, then you got to protect him long-term. We'll see what happens. I think I'm going to do a special episode this weekend, actually. Hoping to bring in one of my buddies to do a retrospective on the NFL draft. That way we'll sound a little bit smarter and when we don't make awful predictions, but you can look back and see how the pieces that were selected fit, and we can criticize when they don't. Fun times. All right. Well, I'm going to end that episode here today. I'm going to watch the NFL draft tonight at Danville Brewing Company. So watch out for me there. But otherwise, I'm just kind of tuning into any and all NHL games, NBA action. I love having YouTube TV. It's not a sponsored post, but just being able to switch on, 4 games at once across hockey and NBA playoffs has been a real treat, and just having that on blast. Great stuff. It's one of the best times of the year watching these two leagues in the midst of their playoffs. Lots of good action to watch. Hopefully we'll be talking about a Warriors series win soon. Let's go Dubs. For Silicon Sports Spectator, I'm Joe. We'll see you on the next time. Hit it.